Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this Talk With series. Today, I have the pleasure of having Nancy do Tertre. How do you pronounce your name?
It is, however, it's Tertre, but you can be whatever you want. I'll answer to two turtles.
Okay, Nancy Tertre, the skeptical psychic, and today she is going to be talking about TSP, case studies in new type of remote viewing. Um, Nancy is the skeptical psychic. She advocates a new approach to psychic ability that combines intuitive imaging with rational feedback. She calls this TSP, a form of tested ESP and clairvoyance. And now the next bits are about her philosophy here, which I think is so important for us to kind of get because it seems right on. TSP is a concept of combining our intuition with our inner vision in order to access information about ourselves and our world that would otherwise remain invisible. There is a link between our minds and the world around us which is vaster and richer than we could have ever imagined. These come from her writings. Our human organism is a finely tuned instrument which is capable of things beyond our wildest dreams. But this kind of information must be distinguished from pure fantasy. It must be verified. And I played up verified because that's so important here. Until we're 100%, you can't bet the farm, for example. But it certainly is quite demonstrably accurate very often. Okay, so let me give it to you, Nancy. I will
Okay.
make you the presenter. There you are. Okay, right now it should be on your screen.
Okay, so I say show my screen, right?
Right.
Yeah, and that should be it.
There you
So
go.
you
We see you and we see the rod, which is
got,
so.
okay, hang on, let me just put on this.
Now that's a good example of something which is beyond most people's wildest dreams and verified.
Yeah, but I don't have, actually, I'm going to try and really get through. I have a ton of material.
Hmm.
And I'm not even going to talk about that, right? That was a
Right.
fantastic experience that I had at the APP Fest. And, love to talk about it maybe in questions, whatever, later. But what I'm going
Right.
to try and do, as I mentioned, I have about an hour and 15 minutes, roughly, if
Right.
I really push. So
Okay.
I'm going to try to get through it.
Good.
And feel free to interrupt if there's anything, that I'm saying that uh, isn't understandable or whatever. I'm happy to kind of stop and try and re-explain. All right, so what I'm going to be talking about is this, as you mentioned, Marty, this TSP. It's a form of what I believe is a form of remote viewing. Okay, and I've developed this over many decades, and uh, it's well, the way that I'm going to break this down is I'm going to show what currently exists, what the current systems rely on, why this is a little bit different, and then I'm going to show exactly a very specific case study of this, so that at every step, you'll be able to see exactly how I'm doing this. But the whole point, as you pointed out, is it's got to be verifiable. There's got to be evidence, and I'm a big believer in that because I know an awful lot of people, not only in the remote viewing world, but also in the psychic and paranormal worlds. And I see a lot of people who want to believe in themselves and who want to believe in others and do it sort of out of goodwill, but a lot of the stuff that they are saying doesn't pan out, and that always bothers me. So this TSP system that I have worked on for so long, I put up a list here of what I have done over, sort of a course of a lifetime. And so I'm drawing on many, many different skills. And I'm drawing not just on the remote viewing skills, but also as an attorney, as somebody who has, I'm certified in this intuitive Gestalt psychotherapy method, psychic detective work, as a newspaper publisher, I mean, as a linguist, as all kinds of things. And I'm sort of trying to take all those skills and use them in a way that I think is going to be helpful for this system. So probably, most people realize all the different types of remote viewing that exist. I put up the 6 main ones that I'm aware of here. The CRV, or the controlled remote viewing, is sort of the granddaddy of them all. And then you have various offshoots: ARV, TRV, SRV, ERV, HRVG. So, and they all have slight variations. I think, if I am correct, well, I mean, the Hawaiian, I think, depends a little bit on NLP, neuro-linguistic programming techniques. The ERV is a little bit more, relaxed, and well, I'm not going to go into all those because I think you guys are somewhat aware of those. What has bothered me, since I'm sort of also in this the psychic world, is that I hear an awful lot of psychics these days telling people that they are remote viewers and that they're remote viewing things. And it's a term, I mean, I'm very, well, as somebody who is focused in linguistics, I tend to get really picky about that. And they're not remote viewing, because remote viewing is not simply a form of clairvoyance or precognitive ability, but it's that ability done with protocols, and the protocols are all important. And these psychics who are saying they're remote viewing aren't using any protocols. They're just using their innate skills. So I wanted to do something that would create sort of a bridge between your typical psychic reading and your typical remote viewing session. And I wanted to do that because I think there are certain skills and abilities that can be brought to the table from the psychic world that are being somewhat maybe squeezed out, I don't know if that's the right word, but by remote viewing techniques. Okay, so what I say here is TSP is a hybrid method that combines a model of traditional psychic reading, which is normally spontaneous, verbal, undocumented, variably front-loaded, and can't be satisfactorily analyzed retroactively, with a structured type of RV kind of a session. So TSP adds the following 4 tools to the RV toolbox. Okay, first, it adds a new discipline into traditional psychic reading. Secondly, permits a broader scope of targets than classical RV. It creates a new analytic structure to review the merits. And then fourthly, it adds a new method to judge potential accuracy of unsubstantiated information. And for me, that last one is kind of it's really a bonus, I think, for this method. And I think time will tell. We'll see if it bears out. But so far, it seems to be pretty good. So I just want to quickly go over talking about protocols, because if you're going to understand TSP and what it's trying to bring into the fold here, you sort of have to understand the protocols. And again, probably most of you already understand, for example, CRV protocols. You're using things like, well, of course, coordinates, ideograms, gestalts, descriptive terms, sketches, clay modeling, dimensional terms, functional terms, prompts, judging, and various things like that. You get into the ARV, and of course you all know that ARV, you're using fewer protocols when you're actually doing your viewing to access the target, but you still have a target. Your target is a random binary choice between the 2 photos, and ultimately only one of those descriptions from your reading essentially is going to either match or not match the ultimate winning photo in the future. And then ERVs uses even fewer protocols. And generally, you're lying in a darkened room, you go into a meditative state, you're given a also numerical coordinate for a target by a monitor. Those are all part of protocols, but you're at much more liberty to sort of do your thing in your viewing and then ultimately either write them down or you're going to share them with your monitor concurrently. There's a good reason why I think we do need and why we use protocols in remote viewing, and I've got 4 main reasons here. The first one is, of course, applications, which was originally intelligence gathering. And in order to do that, to have an application, you've got to be able to do something on command or at will. So this is a way to force yourself to essentially give a psychic reading at will. Second reason is it's proof. For those who don't believe in this stuff, it's a way to prove the validity of psychic seeing or data or sensing, whatever you want to call it. So it's evidence. Third reason is analysis, that anybody can retroactively go back and view a session and say, oh, well, you know, that was correct, that wasn't, they went off here, they misjudged there, you know, however you want to analyze it. And that's very helpful for anybody else who wants to look at the process. And then the final reason is so that you can establish a standardized method so you can break it down into steps and stages, and that enables you to train it. Those are all good reasons to have remote viewing. But as anybody who is maybe well-trained in remote viewing, experienced viewers, maybe natural psychics, a lot of us find, I think, that by forcing ourselves to kind of go through this decompartmentalized, what I call a rat's maze of rules and protocols, while our subconscious quietly gathers the data, many of us feel a little bit constrained, like we're being trapped in a straitjacket. We just kind of want to go exactly where our pathways are taking us. So that's a little bit why I have put together the TSP system. So I want to talk about a couple of different things. I want to talk about targets now. Most RV targets, they generally have a single physical target. The whole idea, since it was originally developed for the military, was that you have the viewer describe 3 main components of a target. One is going to be your physical location, object, or person. The second thing is going to be any associated events, and the third thing is within a related time frame. You can alter the time frame. The monitor generally can help the viewer move forwards, backwards in time, but always in relation to the location, the target, or the events associated with that target. So it's a very, you know, it's like counting your steps forwards and backwards, and you don't walk sideways. So you're very constrained by this, at least I am. TSP targets are not locations. They're not physical places. They are the questions posed by the client. And so you're not limited to a fixed time and space that's related to a physical location. You're not necessarily fixed to a single issue or to a single event. It can be a complex or interrelated series of events, problems, or situations. And I gave several examples here. You know, I said TSP targets can involve information that's fluid or fixed, mental or physical. Examples could include communication with the dead, dreams, memories, future choices, alien encounters, psychological decisions, causation, emotions, medical complications and origins, subtle career choices, financial trends, life purposes, romantic issues, protection from mind control or influences, legal options, and any other type of blended information associated with a question. So what happens is automatically your your target becomes somewhat more complex, which is, in my mind, more potentially valuable. The purpose of a question in classic RV, okay, would be, they're all questions that you might ask yourself in your mind related to the target site, which I give you the example here. The target is the living room. So you're going to ask yourself, you know, what colors are there? It's red. Is it a red floor? Because all of a sudden maybe I'm seeing, I don't know if it could be a kitchen or a living room, but no, it's furniture. Then what kind of furniture? It's a sofa. Okay, now I got a good idea where I am, but I'm not sure. And I keep asking questions until eventually I have fairly uniquely described through my information, by asking myself these little questions regarding the target, I've identified the target. What I'm doing with TSP is different, okay? Because you don't have, your target is the initial question by the client, and sometimes they can be really complex, and you get to mine for more data about that target question as you progress through the protocols of TSP. Okay, you're not limited to mere descriptive information. Being limited like that sometimes makes me crazy, because I want to, I'm like sometimes feel like a racehorse at the starting gate, and I'm being held back. And sometimes you get held back too long and you forget, or you get off the track of your original information. But with TSP, a viewer can view trends on issues, forwards and backwards in time. And I'm also using a certain amount, slight front loading on the question, obviously, as a kind of a psychic searchlight in the universal matrix. All right, so what I want to talk about now in this section is TSP protocols, how they differ from other remote viewing. And I have 6 major ways in which the TSP protocols differ. And I want to go over each one before I give you the actual template of a TSP session. All right, so the first thing is front loading. And this has always been, one of the great hallmarks of all of the different remote viewing, which is, you don't touch anything that involves front loading. I mean, that would be disastrous. I mean, you want to be 100% blind, because your blindness is going to prevent that terrible thing that Ingo used to call analytic overlay. If any of you read Natural ESP, one of his books, that was, it's just awful. I mean, you don't want to touch analytic overlay. And by the way, I understand analytic overlay extremely well. I get it. And most people, in their desire to be successful in a psychic reading, will latch onto an analytic overlay concept. I get that too, okay? But if you're blind, you have this great also basis for comparative judgment between, say, your session or somebody else's sessions. It's great. What I'm saying is allow some front loading. And the reason why I'm saying, and this comes in the form of the client's question, TSP assumes psychic data doesn't have to be pure in order to be accurate. I used to be obsessed with the purity of, if it's not 100% unknown to me, well, then it can't be valuable. And that's not true. And I have learned that over the decades. Second thing is, knowledge can never be totally separated from sensing. And our brain cannot be totally separated from our connection to if you want to call it the matrix or whatever. The more we know, the bigger the psychic internal language we have to discuss psychic information with ourselves. So knowledge is essential. And thirdly, logical inferences can either be disregarded or incorporated by the experienced viewer, similar to, say, in some of the more advanced stages of CRV, where AOLs or the analytic overlays can be considered and even developed as matches. But you have to kind of get very far through that process before you get to that point. And I'm saying get there faster. Next thing, second point here, difference in a TSP protocol. I'm working with both written and spoken data. So in one way, I'm combining the psychic reading with the remote viewing session. Remote viewing sessions generally have to be recorded, written down, so that you can review the protocols in the process. When you're doing a psychic session, psychics are just spouting off whatever is coming into their awareness, and they're not trying to write it down or to match it or whatever. So what I'm doing in TSP is combining both of those. All right. And the first part is a written section I call the advanced reading. I'm going to call it AR. You'll see in the rest of this presentation. And so that information in the AR is all written down. And when I actually speak with the client, I'm going to be either confirming or denying everything I've written down. So that's a form of remote viewing, okay? But after that, I'm going to be adding spontaneous verbal information and recording that also. All right? Next thing I do, which I've not seen anybody do ever, and I don't understand why, is I am incorporating synchronicities as evidence within the session, the TSP session. That was, for those, I'm sure all of you know what a synchronicity is, but for those of you who don't, it was Jung who first coined that term, and it means a meaningful coincidence or an acausal parallelism. And I will explain that a little bit further. I'm going to give you some examples of how that works, because I can tell you in my own experience, I have been shocked to see how often it occurs in conjunction with the reading I'm doing. And I'll show you examples of that. Next way the TSP differs is that I have this hit or miss system established so you can kind of stack up the data. So on the AR, you're going to have two columns basically. One is going to be everything that's confirmed. The other one is going to be everything that is either disconfirmed or unknown or ambiguous to the client, which means I'm being super conservative. And that's important. So the second column is not just misses, but it's everything that, it could be real, but we don't know. Okay, and then you use that information along with you compare them. You're going to use that information along with some of the other bits of information to decide whether the unverifiable information you're getting in your reading is likely to be true or not. And that's what I talk about here. It's another way. So it's a way to judge unverifiable data. I'm going to read you this because it's easier than trying to think it out of my head. So TSP operates on the assumption that if the viewer has been able to achieve a high success rate in the accuracy of the advanced reading, then there's a good probability that the unprovable data delivered by the reader, either in the AR or subsequent reading, is also likely to be accurate. This is an important tool for any viewer attempting to provide useful and forward-thinking data to the client. Most clients are not interested in the confirmed data. They already know it's true. Of course, you can dazzle them with it, but that's not the point of doing this kind of work. Rather, the clients are really interested in the messages or the data they cannot yet confirm, and TSP offers a method for analyzing that type of unverifiable data. And then finally, the judging system is what differs. Rather than in remote viewing, you're trying to make what they call matches of things like shapes, functions, textures, colors, dimensions, sensations, temperatures, and emotions to the target. And by contrast, TSP is using a ranking system that relies on the actual feedback of the client, okay? And this assures or it assumes that the best type of data is that which is going to be confirmed not by you, not by the judges, but the person for whom the reading is intended. And that's a very important aspect of this. So instead of, for example, I know we use, in the ARV here, we're using the TARG 7-point competence ranking system, which in the set, the 1 through 7, 1 being sort of poor match, 7 being the best, it's based on the overall accuracy of matchable elements, correspondence, good analytical information. By contrast, the TSP method evaluates uncanny, relevant, as opposed to matchable data, related synchronicities, proven accurate hits, and then averages those 5 scores into a final score. All right? So I hope I'm not boring you. I'm in the middle of doing my continuing legal education stuff, and I'm spending hours and hours of listening to webinars and things, and I know it gets exhausting. So if anybody's getting exhausted or wants me to slow down or do something different, tell me. So this portion here is, I'm going to explain the TSP template, all right? And this is it, basically. There are 9 steps, or what you might call protocols in this, and each one gets evaluated separately. And what I'm going to do before I go over an actual reading, once again, is I'm going to go over each one of these sections and show you what they're doing, all right? First section is focus. This is going to be just a 1-sentence deal, and it's going to summarize the purpose of the entire reading. And just to give you an idea of the kind of TSP work that I've done, and I'll read these to you because you'll see they're all over the place and they're fascinating. Okay, so the first one, this reading was for a woman who wanted mediumship reading to find out information about her deceased biological father. Okay, so that's a mediumship type reading. Next one, this reading was for a man who wanted a psychic reading involving advice about his ex-girlfriend, mental funk, and whether to purchase a car. Next one, the reading was for an African man who wanted a psychic detective reading regarding suspected witchcraft incident. Next one, this reading was for an Orthodox Jewish man who wanted a reading regarding his alien abduction experience. Next one, the reading was for a woman who wanted some medical intuitive advice and information about her career. Last one was for a Native American woman who wanted psychic detective work into the mysterious death of her cousin, a military pilot, and how to penetrate spacecraft payload shielded by remote viewing protections. And that was an interesting one because I didn't put this in, but I can, if anybody reminds me, I can had some interesting things involved with that particular case. All right, so after the focus, now you're going to let everybody know what your front load was. And this is what always makes me crazy about psychic readings. You never know if the client has walked in and told you their entire life and then said, so what do you think? And well, you'll see. It's broken down into 3 main components, generally. You have because this is what I ask for, any relevant questions and or photos. So you may get photos. Here, I give you an example. I got 3 photos. Sometimes they give them a caption, they name them. I didn't give you the exact names here because I'm keeping people anonymous. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes you get questions, and sometimes it's the other way around. And what I make sure to do is in this additional information category, I'm writing down any other gratuitous information the client has decided to give me. And frankly, I don't need it. Generally, I don't want it. But for whatever reason, they decided to tell me, and I'm including it to let everybody know that that is how I got front loaded, in case anybody has any questions about how I get any of my other data. Next section is overall impression. And this sort of summarizes what I experienced with this reading when I look back on it. So could be, and I always put how much time I spent on the advanced reading, how much time I spent on the actual reading when I actually spoke with the client verbally. Many times, in fact, I would say probably most of the time, I'm spending twice as much time on my advanced reading, and they never know it. Any candid commentary by the viewer as to whether they thought it was a success or not. Supplementary information, did they give anything? Did they confirm? Some clients just don't seem to answer you. You know, how does that affect the reading? Did they argue or agree or disagree? What was their emotional state? Were they excited, argumentative, too helpful? That actually is not helpful at all when they're being too helpful. Were they skeptical? That can also be not helpful. You know, but those are all inputs into your overall sense of the reading. Sometimes I rely more on visuals and sketches, sometimes more auditory or written, and very often that relates to the type of client. So that's another clue as to what's important or not. Sometimes the readings are going to focus on completely different things. Some are more psychic, some are more spiritual, some are psychological, some want, you know, different types of professional advice, which clearly I am not allowed by law to give, and I never do. That's an area that always you have to treat very carefully. I talk about whether the reading progressed chronologically off of my advanced reading. Or was I jumping around? Because that's a bit of information. That tells you something. Was the client able to offer specific questions, or some of them just want to know, well, whatever happens? I've had plenty of clients who just say, I don't want to give you questions or photos, just whatever comes to you. You know, but that's important also in understanding that reading. And then what did I learn off of the reading? The next section is the verification method. And this is where I put in the exact number of pages I've written, the number of sketches, and I write the actual method itself for doing the advanced reading. And I'll let you read that later if you want to. Next section. Okay, so this is the advanced reading confirmations column, I would say, all right? Or what you might call hits. And everything that when I finally get around speaking with the client, I'm going to go over everything that's in my advanced reading, and I'm going to put it into either this pile or the other pile. This pile is a really good pile. So I give you, and by the way, when other viewers or psychics are generally giving their examples, my experience is they generally give their best ever. And that is horribly intimidating to me. So I try not to give my best ever. I try to give what to me feels like a more middle of the road. Okay? And this was pretty good. So the first thing that I said, and this is literally right off of what I had written in response to the client's questions. All right? The pain in the left foot is related to a misalignment of the spine causing redistribution, weight, and compensation of movement. I asked the client if the client had ever been, quote, diagnosed with mild scoliosis of the spine, unquote. Client confirmed she had congenital spinal scoliosis. Now that's, when I write stuff in quotes, that is verbatim off of my advanced reading. When I'm summarizing, I'm not putting it into quotes, but anything quotes is direct off of what I've written without ever talking to them. I asked the client if her foot pain had started within the last 2 years. Client confirmed, stating the pain had started a year ago and that she had noticed its timing coincided with her emotional reaction at the discovery of a family secret. Shortly thereafter, her foot pain began. Now I'm adding, as you can see, nuances to her confirmation. That way, anybody who's going back and reviewing what I've written is going to understand additional information that I've gotten. And there may be things that will come to light later based on that information. Next thing I'm asking, I ask if the client's old therapist's name began with the letter D. And if so, to me, that suggested she should visit her again. Client confirmed. I said her therapist felt like, quote, a, quote, compassionate but strict mommy. Client laughed and said she wanted to tell her this when she saw her. Now, I didn't know that the therapist was a woman. I don't think I ever asked what her name was in this case. Otherwise, I would have written it down. But I know the client was quite impressed with that. Now, in the disconfirmation or the misses pile, I've got everything that's either incorrect, ambiguous, or unknown to the client. So I give you these examples to show that these aren't total misses. They are, but they're maybe not. So, and this is the same client. I said that the pain in the client's left foot is in the area beneath the arch. And then the response was no. The pain is in the heel area due to plantar fasciitis, a condition about which I know nothing, which client says causes small tears in tissue and nerve pain. Client says she had given up her daily walks due to the pain. Regarding the left foot, client said she'd done physical therapy and homeopathy without results and did not want to do the recommended cortisone shot. However, she said she has a high arch in the foot. Now, is it possible that some of that foot pain that she was hoping to get an answer on could be related to a high arch? I suppose it's possible, but she didn't know. And the client is the ultimate determinant of the truth in a TSP reading. Same thing goes below. I said I felt the problem in the foot was related to bone, not tissue. It might be an issue of bowed or bent bone. When I wrote that, I had no idea what I was talking about. And I said specifically metatarsal or overlap of big toe next to the toe, on the toe next to it. The client did not know if this was true, but said her x-ray had indeed shown a bone problem, a spur in the heel. So here is it's sort of a miss, because even though I got immediately attracted to the bone, what I was pulled towards was a bent issue or a bowed issue. Could that be related to a spur? Maybe. But again, as far as I'm concerned, that's a miss, or it's an unknown. And now I want to talk about synchronicities. And I think these are some of the coolest things that are. And I add them into the readings because I think they are critically important. And so I give you just some of the examples here from some of my cases. The first one, and every time you have to relate the synchronicity to the target question. Otherwise, it's not really a synchronicity in relation to the reading. All right, so the target question on the first one related to the deceased biological father. While I was doing this woman's mediumship reading, or that portion of the question that had to do with me contacting her deceased biological father, I've got the TV on, it plays music, I listen to it virtually all the time for years, okay? All of a sudden I'm hearing a child's voice saying, "I love you, Daddy. I love you, Daddy." I'm thinking, well, that's weird. And so I look up and I see on the TV, it's a song called "Innocent Child." And that had everything to do with the reading I was working on. I have never heard that song before or since. It just happened to play. Why? I don't know. I mean, I get chills right now just talking about that because it's peculiar. That's a synchronicity. Next one, target question about where and how to move the residence of the client. And actually, she was the one who brought this up to me. She thought it was a synchronicity. So on the day of our reading, which happened to be 28 days after our first contact, and I had to delay her a bit because I think I was out of the country or something was happening. So it was quite a while since we had first spoke or communicated by email. And that was the day of our reading was the day she all of a sudden sold her house. That's a synchronicity. Next one, target question about clients, quote, pains and health, unquote. She was not specific, not like the other client where the other client was talking about a specific foot pain. In this one, as I'm calling her to give the client her reading, all of a sudden I have such an intense nerve pain in my foot that I literally shriek. I'm all by myself and I'm yelling because the pain is so bad. and it's just for a split second. And it was, thank goodness, she gets on the phone and I'm back together again. But when I had described this to her from later, she confirmed that was the exact type and location of her nondescript pains. Fourth one's a really cool one. This was a target question about how to handle an attorney who was refusing to hand over settlement proceeds from, it was, I think, insurance from an accident, or to return calls to the client over a period of 2 years. This client was totally desperate. And during our reading, all of a sudden, there's a third-party female voice that interrupts our phone call. Now, she's all confused. She says, hello, and we both say, hello, hello. And she says, who is this? And the client identifies himself, and she sounds very confused. And of course, I'm terribly confused now, because now I'm thinking, well, maybe somebody is in his home and has picked up the other line, or maybe, who knows? The long story was that nobody had dialed any telephone numbers. He didn't, and that woman didn't. Turns out that woman was his attorney's paralegal. And she was so confused because she said she didn't make the phone call, and I grilled this client the next day, and I said, did you push a button? Did you do something? Do you have 2 phone lines? I went through everything. And he said, no, not at all. Don't know what that was all about, but the next day he receives his settlement check. So that was a great synchronicity. These things have got to be added back into the readings, and that's what TSP does. Let's see. Then there's a section that has to do with the verbal part of the reading. That's in the messaging, which comes after you've kind of tallied your hits and misses. All right, so in my example here, and I'm just going to read this to you, it's a little easier. The written messages for the client regarding obstacles in her book project were that she should, quote, and this is off of what I had written, okay, in my advanced reading, it wasn't verbal apparently, make sure the content has sufficient resonance with either the average Joe or is strange enough it will titillate/fascinate the general public on a subject that has never been covered before. Client's response included in this section was to inform me she was considered a top national scientific authority on a highly technical topic, which is I'm withholding due to, anonymity, client confidentiality. However, but that her previous book, which I don't think I was aware of, I'd have to check again. But anyway, her previous book had contained hundreds of pages of statistics and tables. So she said this was very valuable advice from her perspective on her next book. And in fact, I had gotten an associated image of her sitting at it seemed to be an oval-shaped table with 6 others. To me, it felt like a board meeting. And it turns out that was the composition of a board that had worked on her previous publication. So the messaging, when you're coming through with this, is whatever it is that's going to help them, pushes the boundaries that they don't know about yet. And then finally, I want to talk about the judging formula, and I got several slides on this. So this is important. The judging and analysis in TSP has got 6 major sections. You've got precision, synchronicity, sufficiency, relevance, interpretation, and then the last one, which is an averaging of the previous 5, which is going to give you your rate or likelihood that the unverifiable messages are accurate. And I'm going to go through each one real fast. Judging, precision. This refers exclusively to uncanny impressions or data obtained during the reading. Freud wrote a book, and it was an essay called The Uncanny. And what was uncanny to him, because he would bump up against the uncanny in his psychiatric work with patients, was that all of a sudden, he would say things or whatever that would be uncanny, and he defined this as being something strangely familiar or homey, which is from the German Heimlich, but it's simultaneously unfamiliar, unheimlich, which is a weird definition. Okay, he says an uncanny effect is produced by effacing the distinction between imagination and reality, which I love because in my book, Psychic Intuition, I actually wrote, I have a very different definition of the imagination and how it functions. So I love that definition. At any rate, in the psychic realm, an uncanny insight is the psychic's imagination, yet also part of the reality of the client. The more precise the insight, the more real the observation. So, when you're tallying your uncanny insights, you need to be very clear about that, because what could be accurate could be kind of garden variety, could apply to many, many things or people or situations, could be pretty good, but it's those things that are uncanny. They sort of really knock your socks off. Those are the things you're adding up in this section. Next section is synchronicities, and you add up the synchronicities. And I think I have only had no more than 2 synchronicities occur in relation to a single TSP reading that I've done. But again, synchronicity defined by Carl Jung, and he wrote a book, Synchronicity, an Acausal Connecting Principle, and he wrote, it's impossible with our present resources to explain ESP or the fact of meaningful coincidence as a phenomenon of energy. This makes an end of the acausal explanation as well, for effect cannot be understood as anything except a phenomenon of energy. Therefore, it cannot be a question of cause and effect, but of falling together in time, a kind of simultaneity. Because of the quality of this simultaneity, I've picked on the term synchronicity to designate a hypothetical factor equal in rank to causality as a principle of explanation. Okay, so it's included as a meaningful parallel intersection of acausal events. Okay, and that's why I'm including it here. Next judging aspect is going to be sufficiency, and that's pretty much you're just tallying up your hits and misses columns. The next one is relevance. And since I'm a lawyer, I decided to look for some help in the law defining what's relevant in a particular lawsuit. And under federal law, Rule 401, Federal Rules of Evidence, there's a test. And it says evidence is deemed relevant if A, it has any tendency to make a fact more or less probable than it would without evidence, and B, the fact is of consequence in determining the action. So that gives us a fairly wide net of relevance for what's relevant data when you are doing a session. So in TSP, data is relevant if it can provide support for 1, any facts provided by or known to the client related to the questions, or 2, support the ultimate message or conclusion of the reading. And of course, you have to be really careful because psychic data, as we all know, can come in as being either literal or symbolic. And if it's symbolic, it requires interpretation as to its relevance. So you have to take into consideration that aspect. Okay, the 5th factor of judging is interpretation. And my fundamental rule here is that, it's fine that we try to interpret some of the data that we get because we're trying to pull together something meaningful for the client. And as I have said before, if I say to a client, well, it makes noise, it's kind of tall, and it's triangular. Do you know what that is? And they're going to get really mad at you because they're expecting something from you. So you do, in TSP, you've got to push that analytic aspect a little bit further. However, ultimately, the final interpretation is going to be made by the client. Okay? So, and I use the comparison here. Say, Freud called dreams the royal road to the subconscious mind. And a dream imagery, like other types of subconscious activity, can be aided by objective interpretation or universal symbolism, but ultimately only the dreamer knows the true meaning. And by the way, that is why, and I apologize to those who disagree with me, I find dream dictionaries to be primarily useless. Not only do they all contradict each other, but generally, and I'm pretty good at dream analysis for others, generally it doesn't touch the real meaning. And as Stanley Krippner has pointed out, dreams are actually often precognitive and telepathic. So the imagery is actually shared. It's not exclusive to the dreamer. And so this is similar to doing a psychic reading for a client where the reading is essentially dreamed on behalf of the client. I actually got in touch with Stanley Krippner once because I wanted to ask him about a dream where I had entered my husband's dream, and we were able to verify it in terms of every aspect, including the real-time timing of it and the in-dream experience. So it was, you could do this, and this is essentially when you get good, you're doing this with a reading, either as a psychic or a remote viewer. And then finally, what you're doing is you're averaging together all of your scores. A 5 is going to be, it's going to indicate that there's a very strong likelihood, given the sufficient amount of precise, relevant, uncanny data, supplemented by synchronicities, interpreted almost exclusively by the client, that any of your unsubstantiated messages are going to be correct. High likelihood. And the score of 1 obviously is the lowest score, means probably not. So now I can give you finally an actual, I'll show you the entire transcript of a TSP case. This one I did, it was quite unusual for me. I really don't get alien abduction questions too often, at least not within this context. And it's not my best, it's not my worst. And I figure that's going to be the most useful as a teaching tool. I just thought it was very interesting. So you get a feel for how this works. All right, so in this, the actual TSP transcript, and you're going to, all of this information up on top, name, email, all of that's going to be redacted. And this was the man from New Jersey who wanted reading only regarding his alien abduction experience. No photos. He did send one sketch, handwritten sample of 14 symbols arranged in 3 lines. I didn't know how I was supposed to be reading this. They were not like, letters or anything like that. They're hyphens, slashes, wavy lines, things like that. But he gave me 4 questions. And the questions were, how are they, the aliens, communicating with me? Do you have any information about my contact with them? How are they in contact with me today? Do you have any interpretation or impressions of my alien writing sample? Now, he also, somewhere in his initial communication with me, he says that he was abducted by gray aliens when he was 5 in Jersey City in 1966. He saw a MUFON hypnotist and is now, apparently, whatever that regression was, he's now convinced of his experience, and he tries not to read any UFO books, including mine, to avoid prejudicing his own perspective or memories. So here's my overall impression. So the reading was originally for a half hour. It went on for an hour. Oh, I see I didn't put my advanced reading amount of time on this. Well, anyway, I said my immediate concern was that I wouldn't be able to decipher his alien handwriting since it didn't exactly coincide with other samples I've seen. And second, since I was never asked to do a psychic reading on an alien experience, I wasn't sure this was something I could do. Overall, this was a learning experience for me. So the impression area here is a place for us to be really, it's where we learn as viewers from ourselves. And I learned one incredibly important nugget of information. Humans have the psychic ability to tap into the minds of alien beings. Well, that was a shock to me because I never, ever believed that that was a possibility. That, in other words, we're not subject to total mind control in terms of implanted thoughts or memory erasures, as is generally supposed in the field of ufology. In this reading, I realized only in retrospect, I was able to give accurate information about his abduction experience, not just from his perspective, but from the perspective of his alien abductors. And that was an eye-opener for me for several reasons. The advanced verification section here was, I did 3 handwritten pages. I had 6 little sketches. 6 is a pretty high number of sketches, little sketches for me to do, so it was more on the visual side. All right, now I'm in the column of the hits, all right? I heard now this was a name. I've withheld it, obviously. I asked if this had any significance. And yes, he only knew one person by this name. It was his landlord, where he'd lived in a certain period of time. I asked him if he'd had any contact experiences while living there. He said it was possible. He'd had lots of missing time in his life, particularly when he was living alone, as he was when he lived there. And additional information for me, he also believed he was what's called a targeted individual TI, and that such states could be induced by CIA and aliens working together. All right, that's his theory. I've added that as a nuance to that question. I drew a sketch, all right, of 2 gray aliens standing together with one holding something that looks like a black, shiny, flat screen horizontally like a tray. I wrote, quote, this is straight out of the AR, I see them holding a flat reflective screen like that of a flat screen TV, but thin like a pane of glass, and feel it can become opaque black or change and reflect color images. Feel this is a communication and education tool, like a book of knowledge. Client confirmed and began to choke up and cry briefly. Now, I was shocked when he started to cry. Didn't expect that at all. That's a strong emotional reaction generally means you've hit on something pretty profound. He said he knew immediately to what I was referring. He said I was correct. This technology was extremely thin, like aluminum foil, and he compared it to the old show Romper Room. I don't know if any of you remember that, where in the beginning of the show you got this female teacher host holding up a magic mirror, and she'd say, I see Jimmy, I see Susie out there, and whatever. Anyway, so he let's see, he said he was abducted from his bed 5 times that he could recall, placed on a table in a spacecraft, surrounded by several different alien species, and shown this specific screen technology. So that's kind of a good hit. That's pretty uncanny. Then I felt that they had been making various modifications on him, and I described several of them here, and I'm not going to go over all of them. But you'll see, like, I drew a little sketch. I saw him with a stick or a beam connecting from his hand to the ground. I wrote, quote, I assume this means you have some strong power connection to the earth. Is this an environmental concern connection? Are you a good gardener? Do you have a green thumb? Do you care about environmental issues? I mean, that was literally, as a viewer, that was my interpretation of kind of a symbolic looking sketch thing that I had done. Client was startled and said, you're amazing, and confirmed that he is extremely environmentally sensitive. He said before he'd ever read any books on the subject, he'd written about environmentally connected spirituality. So that's sort of a ding, ding, ding. Let's see, I don't know if I mean, you can look at the rest of these later if you want to. These are more in the hit column. Oh yeah, this was a good one. I apologized to the client for my next sketch, saying it seemed different from the other modification sketches. This is where I thought that the aliens might have modified him for communication. Anyway, I had no idea how to interpret it. I had sketched a large triangle on the ground with a door at the apex and a large arrow at the right side pointing directly at the door. I wrote, quote, see a hill or a mountain with a door on the summit. There's a large arrow to the right of it pointing to the door. What is the door? Where does it open? Reminds me of the 10 Commandments on tablets brought down by Moses from the mountain. Old Testament, important? Question mark. The whole thing was weird to me and didn't seem to be related to aliens. The client explained, I am Jewish. I became an Orthodox Jew when I was a child. There was an ark in the synagogue on a platform, and I always felt that was special. And he said it looked somewhat like what I had described. He added, when I was a child, I talked to God. And in this abduction experience, and again, I'm not going to bore you with all the total details on this, but what I described was I felt I was inside spacecraft, and I felt there were two of them moving towards Jersey City across the Hudson River from the direction of New York City. And I described various things, a green light associated with it. I saw his apartment building from the air. Now that's weird because he wasn't in the air. He was presumably in his bed someplace. And I wrote, see hovering over your apartment, the building has a white or cream color, light color on the exterior, has a flat rectangular shaped roof. Client responded exactly and confirmed that he had indeed lived in an apartment where he'd been abducted in Jersey City. Said the building was a cream color with white trim and was rectangular in shape with a flat roof. Bingo. So that's, to me, that's an uncanny connection there. You know, and there are other ones that, you know, maybe they were uncanny or not. And I'm not going to run through all of them, just want to give you an overall feeling for how these things work. Next category, these are the misses, things that are either denied, unknown, or ambiguous to the client. Let's see if I have anything good here that, okay, here's an interesting example. And this has, I wondered if the aliens would have an interest in monitoring the client. I wrote, in a nutshell, my feelings are you're likely part of their genetic engineering project. As such, they would do occasional or regular checkups to analyze your overall progress with your genetic modifications and make sure you're functioning as expected. And he said he had no opinion on this. He didn't know if it was right or wrong. But later he tells me that the aliens actually operated on his testicles. Mm-hmm. So, there are, sometimes you learn things, and that's why I always add this additional information, whatever they're adding. Sometimes it'll make sense to you. So let's see. Well, I mean, clearly this one, he had no clue. As part of my description of his abduction experience, I wrote, I felt they had performed, quote, a mathematical equation or algorithm to determine something about you, unquote, and he had no idea, no opinion. Doesn't recall, you know, whatever. So anyway, so now I get to the messages delivered after the confirmation of the data, after I put together my hits and misses. And now it could be anything that I put together as messages for him that from my AR, my advanced reading, or it could be completely verbal, spontaneous, whatever's coming to me now. And by the way, by now it's going to include all that data that I've just absorbed by his confirmations and disconfirmations. So now I'm really clear about my front loading when I get to this section. But this is what people need to know. So overall, my information I felt tended to confirmed, and this is mostly off of the AR, that he had indeed experienced an alien abduction by 3 gray aliens, had undergone surgery aboard a spacecraft. He may have some type of upgraded biochemistry, either visual or intuitive, which he seemed to feel was, I didn't go into that, but he seemed to feel that was true, as well as a number of body clones as a result of the surgery on his testes. This information tended to suggest he continues to be monitored to some degree in order to track his progress and performance on the upgrades. I didn't address his issue about being a TI. I didn't get any information on that. I didn't get any particularly strong information about my interpretation of his handwriting sample. So I'm clear about what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And that's where I think everybody needs to get. One of the big problems I have with remote viewing is that they're called hits or misses. And if you don't hit, well, then you're just wrong. And there's sort of a shame that that comes with that, which is awful. And I have listened to every remote viewing teacher I've ever had. Oh, you got to be kind to yourself. Don't worry about it. Everybody hits and misses. It'll come back, whatever. But I know, particularly when you're dealing in statistics to sort of grade these things, it gets really frightening. So we need to be really honest with ourselves and not be afraid to be a little bit wrong, kind of wrong, terribly wrong, or all those shades and variations. All right, so in my analysis here, I gave myself a 5 for precision, uncanny. I had, I think it was 5 or more. Synchronicities, none. Sufficiencies, well, I balanced out. My hit column was 14, my misses was 6, balance of 8 hits, so I'm in the good realm. Relevance, my responses were relevant to his questions. Interpretation, yes, he had basically I'd only relied on his interpretations. My final score on this was 3.8. 3.8 out of a total of 5 is not bad. It indicates a fairly strong likelihood that my message to him is probably accurate. And that's what we're getting at with TSP. And I wanted to show you here, these are 21 TSP cases that I've done. And just to give you a sense of what we're dealing with. So I give you the number of photos. The average number that I get is 2. The average number of questions I get from the client is about 5. In terms of precision or uncanny, my average tends to be about 3.7. That's not bad. The hits generally it almost doubles or outnumbers the number of misses fairly regularly, although you can see sometimes it just falls apart. Sometimes you don't have enough information to really make a big difference. The number of synchronicities, this was shocking to me, occurs in 38% of all of my cases. Sometimes, as you can see from this, there's more than one synchronicity associated with a case. So my final scores, I show a 3.8 average out of a total of 5, suggesting that more likely than not that what I'm delivering as a message is probably accurate. And my average hit rate, that's just the relationship between the hits and misses columns, shows about a 67 average hit rate. Again, not too shabby. It's not bad. Could it be better? Of course. Now, there are things that will always throw you off using this type of a judging system, such as you won't always get a synchronicity. A synchronicity is going to bump the score way up. Similarly, well, and let's see if I can give you a good example. I mean, having 2 synchronicities, if you look down on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th case down. No, the 7th case down. 2 synchronicities. I got a 5 score on that one. But I had really uncanny good information. My hits, I had a whole lot of them, and they outweighed my misses. But if your client, for example, can't seem to formulate their questions, you're going to have a problem with relevance. I've had clients say, what about when I was in the hospital at 9 months old, or in the hospital for 9 months? What they meant to say was I was 9 months old. Well, all of a sudden the relevance factor is going to get messed up. So I don't take, these scores, the final scores don't indicate your ultimate, hit or your ultimate miss. They're really taking into consideration many different factors, all of which really affect how you're going to end up with your final score. So, final thoughts, wrapping up here. What are the advantages of TSP? The first one is solutions. It addresses the problem of how to use traditional RV techniques for real people seeking real answers to complex questions in the real world. For most people, traditional RV data is usually too fractured, indecipherable, or limited in scope for the average client. Unless you happen to have, say, an intelligence agency with a lot of operatives working on the case, or you have satellites that can verify certain things, or any number of, if you're backed up to some extent. But most people are just looking for information that they can understand. Messages. TSP also offers an RV method to assess future potential value and reliability of the messages or unverifiable data. Traditional psychics have no way to evaluate their messages. They just kind of blurt them out and you take them with you, and if they happen, they happen. By contrast, traditional RV methods tend to discard messaging because they're considered too analytical or too left brain to have any value. And finally, and this is really sort of goes to the heart of what I have worked on here, which is TSP hopefully bridges the gap between classic psychic work and classic RV. It brings a new level of legitimacy to the field of psychic work in a post-military oriented RV world by providing structure, format, and platform for analysis of psychic readings within the civilian realm specifically. And that's about it. That's all I got. Oh, I did pretty well on my timing.
That's really great, Nancy. Thank you so much. That was fascinating. Fascinating. And I really, I like the way you do that evaluation right at the front end with the client. That's kind of really cool. Okay, let's open it up for questions. You guys know how to turn on your mic or put something. Yeah, Ronald just gave you a thank you. But questions, comments, chat box, or turn on your mic.
I have a question, Marty.
Sure, go ahead, John.
Hi, Nancy. Thanks for coming. This was fascinating.
Thanks.
It's okay. I'd like to ask you a question from your other book, How to Talk to an Alien. I know that's not the topic, but I'm actually in the middle of reading it, and I kind of wondered if you had any tips for. See, this is new. I'm a trained remote viewer as well, but telepathy and channeling are things that are pretty new. I wonder if you have any tips on learning it, or any references that you can point out that you think are good. It's an interesting topic, but I don't know what's reputable out there, to be honest.
Good question. I mean, as far as let's see, I will give you a very strong reaction to channeling, which you're not going to get this from, say, a lot of other mediums or psychics, because a lot of people think channeling is a terrific thing. I think I refuse to channel. I know that there are times when I can feel energetically that I'm starting to slip into it, and I will do everything to pull myself out of it. Because when you are channeling, and this is my opinion, you are literally handing over your most precious vessel in your life, and you're handing it over to an entity about which you know nothing, even if you think you do. And always you can go back to the trickster concepts. They abound all over anything to do with the paranormal, with ghosts, spirits, as well as aliens. And I will just say that I actually still know them. A couple of friends of mine from college whose mother was one of the top alien channelers in the world. And I used to hear the craziest stories. But one of the craziest, which I had occasion to re-verify, I'm talking decades later, I re-verified this with both kids, they were both friends of mine, about their mom. And they had watched her within the period of 17 seconds put on 40 pounds after she channeled mistakenly a bad alien entity. She had never done it before, but she was never able to tell they take the weight off. And they watched all the buttons on her shirt pop off and her skirt, busted. And I actually verified it with their father as well. So I don't mess with that. I don't hand over my vessel to anybody. My body, my brain, everything is sacred to me. I absolutely will use all of my skills for communication with other entities, and I do that. So
I understand what you're saying about channeling. I'm more interested in sort of the research of it rather than practicing. But to be honest, I'm more interested in telepathy, because I know that's real, and it's happened to I guess quite a few of us, probably. I'm assuming, since we've been remote viewing for a while. But do you have any comments on telepathy and communicating with using communication without words, basically, and understanding each other?
Oh, sure. I mean, telepathy, as far as I'm concerned, telepathy is it's extremely natural. We all do it. It's trained out of us. It's used by many, let's say, alien entities. It's used by animals. It's used by deceased spirits. It's information that we're accessing without a sensory organ that is designed to receive that type of information. But to me, it's sort of, to me, that's not even a question. It's just like, yeah, of course telepathy exists. I have so many experiences with that. I can't even count them. I mean, it's just regular, happens virtually every day. And the more you do this kind of work, you're exercising that particular muscle, let's call it, which is a form of communication with yourself, so that you can understand when data is coming in and identify it and then figure out what it means. And do I know any good books on the topic? I mean, I think I would have to research. I have read hundreds and hundreds of books. I don't know that any one of them really jumps out on the topic of telepathy. Everybody touches on it because I think everybody kind of acknowledges it.
Can I ask you just one last, so I don't take over? Can you differentiate between telepathy and clairvoyance, where you just know something, or you get a giant message all at once, where you have to unravel it? I mean, is there a clear distinction, or is it are they close related?
Telepathy is mind-to-mind communication. Clairvoyance is connecting with information about a distant location or a time or event. That's the difference.
Okay. Thank you. So anybody else? Question, comment?
This is Evelyn. Hi, Nancy. I love the way you think. I've read the first few chapters of that Psychic Intuition. I loved your diamond story.
Oh, thank you.
And just this weekend, I have a terrible time with displacement because my mind tends to go to the wrong picture. I don't know why, but I was really good to start with, and now I'm almost always wrong. So this weekend I tried to do a single one. I concentrated on the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, and all I could get was about 3 things on the paper, so I disregarded it. But I wanted to know their emotions after the game was over, and I got a name, and then I got singing and laughing. And it's like, well, shoot, that's exactly what they were probably doing at the end of the game.
Yeah.
But I didn't wager on it because I thought I didn't get enough stuff, and I got disgusted. So it's like, I shouldn't have downgraded what I got, because that's probably exactly what I would have seen if I could have seen them on the TV the second the game was over. and my roommates were cheerleaders in college, so maybe that's why I picked the cheerleaders. I really don't know, but I've been struggling a lot with this displacement and that kind of thing. I don't seem to work well with it. But your thing really intrigues me. I love the way you think. So can you tell us a thumbnail sketch about the TSP training? What does it cost? What does it entail? How do we do it? Do we have to come to New York? Can we do it online? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And by the way, it sounds like you're not displacing too much. It sounds like your natural strongest connection point is emotions, which is really useful for you to know, because then you can probably rephrase your questions the way you were doing in terms of emotional outcome, and maybe that'll help turn that tide for you if that's what you're feeling.
That's what I was trying to do. I'm a psychotherapist, so a nurse therapist, so that I was trying to phrase it towards what their emotions would be at the end of the game.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I can tell you that as you can sort of see, I mean, I get questions about all kinds of stuff, but I can tell you the questions that I get regarding, usually finances, money, or more mundane matters, I tend to have less interest in. I don't connect as well. I would like to connect, but there's not that, you don't get pulled out on that really interesting psychic beam as easily. So that's something that I'm constantly trying to work on. And there may be ways around it the way you're doing it. In terms of the training stuff, I actually have had a number of inquiries about it, and I haven't put the actual course together, but this is really my first introduction of TSP, thanks to Marty. And so I'm hoping to put together some training materials over the next few months, and then offer some type of a course on it. So I haven't decided yet, but if you send me an email, I'll keep you on a list, and then it has to when I get.
I would love to be somebody somebody who tests things for you or experiments on ideas for you or whatever. I would love to do that, because that's right up my alley, to do things that are kind of off the edge a little.
That'd be fantastic. I really appreciate it.
And I live in Alaska, so my time zone is different, but you know what? I can live with that.
Very cool.
Okay. Thank you, Evelyn. Ron has asked a question in the chat box. I really enjoyed both your books. Are you going to write any more?
Well, yeah, I have to. I'm currently writing a book on politics. But yes, I'll get back to these topics. I'm working on, it's more of I guess it would be more government or political theory than current. I'm not writing about current politics, otherwise I get in real big trouble. Actually, I probably get in more trouble writing what I'm writing, but but yes, eventually, yes, I want to.
Give us a hint of what you're writing that you might get into trouble about. Or don't.
I don't even know that I dare even mention it, because it's pretty. It would be controversial. Did I tell you about this, Marty, or no?
It's not ringing any bells.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, I think I better. No, I'm going to keep this one. I'm going to keep this. We'll see what happens with it.
Okay. Well, when you publish it, we'll want to do a talk with about it. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Okay, well, I found one of the statistics you gave very interesting, that when the client was able to verify that whole thing about that being at the front end is just fascinating and just such a good idea. And your hit rate was about 67%, which is sort of where we are in, ARV and RV and all of that. So that was,
Exactly.
yeah, so I thought that was quite interesting. The good viewers and everybody, that's where we are. And then connecting it all, excellent. That was just a marvelous idea. How many you said only a few other with the aliens. I mean, you've got a book on how to talk to aliens. You showed us an example of aliens. Um, is there anything sort of, I don't know what to say, novel that's coming to your mind about the other contacts you had with your clients that had alien abductions or something similar?
I can't think of any other TSP reading that I've done that involved aliens or abductions. I've sort of dealt with many of those issues separately because I've been very busy putting together a database of alien languages. So I speak with many people about alien languages.
Oh my.
In terms of doing, and I don't do hypnotic regressions. I mean, I've done various other types of regressions, but I don't do those, and I'm not a trained hypnotist. So that's really not been my thing. It's only if somebody happens to come to me with a kind of unusual issue like that. So I don't have really any other experience that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay, well, tell me a little more. Maybe that's what your book is about, which I have not read. Alien languages. I mean, how do you get information on alien languages?
Well, that's the whole, what I do in the book, and again, I hadn't seen anybody do this in the field of ufology, was to apply, sort of basic principles of comparative linguistics to alien languages. And I first had to start out with, well, do they speak? Because a lot of the people who were in this field will say, well, aliens only communicate via telepathy. Well, that's incorrect. And I've found plenty of written cases where I was able to find out how they were communicating. And when you're communicating telepathically, you can communicate several different ways, and you can make mistakes several different ways. You can do it in different languages, or you can do it in no language at all.
I see.
So I was analyzing the telepathy. I was analyzing what types of languages, if they're verbal or nonverbal, and also written. But there's the classic example that I always give everybody is, and also with accents. A lot of the aliens will speak, your native language, let's say, but they're going to speak with an accent. And that's really valuable information. So the classic example that I always give of that is, with if I'm going to talk like this, well, then, you have a certain idea where I'm from. If I were to come from some place like this, you might have a totally different idea. Versus, I do not know where do you think I'm from, and so three different ways that English, all of a sudden you've got images popping off in your head, and you've got background data about who I am, where I've come from, how I've learned this language. You've got all kinds of things. And the aliens do that.
And this comes from stuff that's been written by abductees and people like that, or from remote viewing. Where did your information come from?
Well, it's all coming from cases in the field of ufology.
Okay. So fascinating. Let me ask you another question. As you know, I just recently came out of the UFO ET closet, so I'm getting inundated with a lot of information.
I know, I'm really proud of you.
And so, since nobody else is asking questions, let me stay with this for at least one more. Um, and I got asked this by a skeptic, and it was a pretty good question. He said, "Look, uh, I told him, in fact, something you told me at the conference, which is, sure, there are lots of people that have implants in them, and there are pictures of them. And indeed,
Yeah.
I looked that up. I just Googled abductees, implants, pictures, and up popped a lot of pictures.
Yeah.
To somebody like that who is a skeptic, they would say, "Oh, come on, those were phony. You know, you can do things with Photoshop, etc., etc." But his question was, if this is so true, why doesn't one of these people, you know, go to CBS, NBC, one of the cable stations, Fox News, and say, you know, here I am. Here, take some pictures, take some x-rays, do whatever you want to verify that this implant is here and it's too close to my brain so they can't take it out and it's got special characteristics and stuff like that. At least I've never seen a TV show like that. And I couldn't answer him.
Well, that's because everybody gets laughed out of town, and they're not given the time. If you watch any of the newscasts that have ever been done, for example, just on basic UFO sightings, and they're so condescending and sarcastic and giggly. They talk about the giggle factor on all of this, and that was done very specifically. It started out as a disinfo thing, and it just has snowballed, and it has a life of its own now. So that if you have something like an implant, oh, it's alien. Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, you're not telling us about this. You're not, whatever. Nobody wants to be laughed at. And so it's a case of the emperor with no clothes.
I guess that was the answer I gave him, but if you think about it, it's not really sad. There must be somebody, some station, that with in hand, a person. I mean, some of these I've been told you can see. They're right here. I'm pointing to my wrist, or in the brain you can see them. I mean, they're so obvious, and it would.
Hey, Marty?
Yeah, or is this a major conspiracy? Is that what's going on? Is that what you would say?
Can I add something, Marty? This is
Sure, of
Linda.
course. Yeah, go ahead, Linda.
Actually, that entire movie, Unacknowledged, addresses that point.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got a interview there from a fellow by the name of Richard Doty. And Richard was from, I think, the Naval Office of Special Investigations, and his job was, in fact, investigating, ET events. And he actually says, right on camera, flat out, how they managed the press, and that they bought them off, and they bought them off with bags and bags and bags and bags and bags of cash.
They being ETs? Wait, they being ETs or people?
Well, no. I'm sorry. The government that he actually delivered grocery bags worth of cash to pretty much all of the major news networks, the editors. He said they had people in every news outlet, basically in every single city, and it's stunning. It's gut-wrenching. But the long story short is, not only is there the ridicule factor, which has been built in ever since the 50s, and it's been intentional and on purpose, but they also completely control the media, and they do it with money.
Okay, let me ask a different question. You know about this To the Stars Academy, which I put out there? Hal Puthoff is a part of it. It's a public company. Have you?
Well, when you say, do I know about it, what do you want to know about it?
No. What I'm telling you about it, that maybe this is a breakthrough, because this is a private company. In fact, maybe I should take back this. I think this is important enough. Let me show it to you. Let me see. I'm going to take this back and then I'm going to try to find it. Okay.
Well, I'm aware of the organization, yeah.
Okay,
And my problem.
Did you
Yeah.
listen? Did you listen to their? I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm
Yeah, I
basically
know. I
saying
saw the.
this may be
Yeah,
the way around it.
I saw the movie,
Oh,
the
okay.
trailer thing that they
Well,
produced.
and that's my question. If you've seen the movie, and I don't know if you've seen the movie, Nancy, but
Which movie are we talking about now?
whose screen are we seeing now? Yours or
We're seeing
mine?
yours.
You're still
Yours.
seeing? Oh, you are seeing mine?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me. I just want to bring it up for if I can.
Marty, while you're looking, this is Evelyn. Dr. Lear was somebody who took out many implants before he died a year or two ago. And he was actually a foot surgeon, but he took implants out, hands and arms and feet and stuff when people wanted him to. And he did it on film with narration. So there,
Is that on the web?
It's all over. I knew him. I was he was supposed to invite me to see his last surgery and didn't, and then he passed away. But he conducted 16 of them, and he would send off these implants, to some of the best labs in the country, and they found there were some components that didn't come from this earth. He also told me that these implants, he had to figure out how to take them out because they would disintegrate within, I guess, seconds or minutes if they weren't covered in the person's tissue or blood in the test tube. They could also move if he, tried to get them with a scalpel. They would go running around the body as if they had some awareness.
What's his name again?
Dr. Roger Lear.
Roger, and spell his last name?
I posted a link in the chat box for this. Patient 17.
The one he took out of Whitley Strieber, he tried to take out of Whitley Strieber's ear, and that was filmed. Whitley Strieber, the author, and it moved around in his ear so much, they decided not to take it out because it was damaging his ear.
Okay.
And after the surgery was over, it moved back to where it had been for years.
Okay, and that's in this documentary here that Ben has put up. Is that correct?
That's not Whitley Strieber's.
No, but something like that.
Yeah, and the thing is, the stuff is made out of material that's not even found in our galaxy. Forget Earth. Okay,
but I don't know how much that's well documented. Again, what I'm trying to do now that I'm out of the closet, and I have Simeon Hine coming, and he's going to talk about the best documented cases, and that's what you guys are giving me, more information to go after.
Lear is spelled the other way, by the way. It's Leir.
Okay, good, thank you. Here's the Academy to the Stars, and what's so fascinating about this, to the Stars Media. Okay, no, that's not the main one. Well, that must be. Let me see if I can get the main one from here. The main one, what's so interesting is that we all know Hal Puthoff. Here it is. And you look at the list of the people who are involved here. Now, this is a private, it's called Public Benefit Company, which I don't even know exactly what that is, but it's not nonprofit. It's something else because they're selling stock. And as soon as I send some people here, again, the doubters say, oh, they're just trying to raise money. But this is the kind of craft that they're talking about exploring. And they combining aerospace, entertainment, and let me just get down to the list of the people who are involved here. Okay, so this Tom DeLonge, and I must be the wrong generation, but he's apparently in the entertainment business and pretty big in it, and I think he's one of the funders of it. But now you've got Puthoff up here, Vice President of Science, and he's talking about things of getting 25th century technology in the 21st century. So he's now talking about probably using information, now that I'm out of the closet, potentially using information from the ETs. He's always been big after he left SRI on the zero-point energy concept, the vacuum energy concept, that well which is under this, and the way that we can in fact get plus energy. You put in 1 watt and you get out a watt and a half or something like that. Um, uh, and he's just big that way. Now, Steve Justice was with the Skunk Works, okay, the Lockheed Skunk Works. We're talking about people here at the highest level. This guy was an intelligence officer, Department of Defense, National Security Affairs advisor. There's something very unusual about this group in my, I guess, both intellectual opinion and my sense of this. And so it's like there's something going on. Now, I don't know if it's a battle against the kind of conspiracy that you're, suggesting has been going on since the 50s, or maybe it's the government's way out. They're not going to admit that they were doing all the things that have been suggested.
Yeah.
Because
Marty?
Yep. But that's what do you guys think about that? Do you think this could be a disclosure?
Yeah, I tell you what. Let me just put this in real quick, because I keep getting, my connection keeps getting disconnected, and this is like the 4th or 5th time I've come back in.
Okay.
This is my concern. Tom DeLonge is the figurehead for this.
Right.
And he has every bit of his information is been conferred to him through some official or government source.
Correct.
He has no firsthand knowledge. And I'm not going to beat Dr. Greer's, drum, but he actually communicates with the extraterrestrials. And he has a very serious problem with Tom DeLonge, and he feels that this project is being backed with DOD money, and in fact is going to advance the evil alien concept, which in very broad strokes is a setup for, it's like the last 9/11, the world, version of 9/11. They're going to hoax an alien invasion and strip us of all the rest of our rights, and then turn, the Earth into a military-run planet.
Okay.
And as inconceivable as that sounds, there actually is an awful lot of evidence that supports that. And, once again, that's what the movie Unacknowledged is about, and I would, urge you to watch it. I think it would be very elucidating.
Well,
but in any case, I personally agree with what Dr. Greer has to say about Tom DeLonge, and I'm very concerned that Hal Puthoff is involved with this group.
Well, and you see, I'm coming from the exact opposite position, which is I think that, and because I know Hal so well, and his integrity is way too high for him to be brought to agree to go into this if he even sniffed the ultimate goal being what you just enunciated. So I'm coming from a position that, yes, the government is involved. Yes, there may even be some aliens involved, but we've heard of good aliens and bad aliens, okay? I've been out of the closet long enough, and I followed this stuff since the Blue Book. I'm old enough that I read the Blue Book when it first came out. And I feel that this may be a positive, organized disclosure. But nevertheless, you gave me, that was my question. How did you feel? And you told me how you feel. You don't believe it's that way. Certainly, we're all going to be watching it to see what they do with it.
Yeah, but here's the thing. You've already been sold on the evil aliens concept. You've bought that, obviously.
I have not.
Well, you just said.
No,
everybody knows about the good aliens and the bad aliens. Well,
right.
I have never had a negative alien experience, and I'm not convinced there are any. And I think there's really good reasons why there aren't.
Okay, but then you were the one, didn't you just say Dr. Greer was saying it's something about the evil aliens taking over the planet?
Right, they're going to hoax that. It's an intranational power groups that they actually have technology that is not known outside of their, I don't know, but now we're back in conspiracy speak, but they've got things that we have no concept of. And the big plan is to hoax an alien invasion that people will believe because everybody's been sold on the, evil ET thing. And once you start looking into, critically into the evil ET thing, it's pretty ridiculous, in my opinion.
Okay, I just let me see if I understand. I think that what you're saying is that the Illuminati or some group like that is going to make a hoax, maybe using these people even though they don't know they're being used.
Exactly.
And that then, if we thought we were going to be invaded, they somehow would get more power. I mean, that's
that's it. And it's actually, these plans have been on the books since the 50s.
Well, okay. I tend not to want to believe. I tend not to believe that. Again, I don't think Hal would be involved if he.
I would love to be wrong.
If he sniffed that. Well, all we can do as citizens is watch, right?
Once again, I would say you really need to see that movie Unacknowledged. It's a real eye-opener. And if you haven't done much, if all that you've had exposure to is, public media, just the common media, and then you start investigating, what gets printed and.
Well, I did see, again, because it's amazing how much stuff I did see. Thrive, which I think has pretty much, doesn't have the strong UFO connection, but it has a connection like the Illuminati group who are going to take over the planet. So this is another version of how they're going to do that. So I don't know what to tell you. Okay, hey, anybody else want to comment on this whole thing? I see this as being significant. You're agreeing because it's a significant step. The question is in what direction? Anybody?
I have a question, Marty.
Yeah,
For Nancy, first, there was a lot of information in your presentation. Is it possible for you to make that available to us so we can reread it?
I don't know how I would make it available.
Is it a PowerPoint? You could email it to Marty, or if last resort, I guess I could
go through the video.
Go through the video.
The video, yeah. I'll be putting the video out, by tomorrow if I don't have time to do it today. And remarkably so, let me tell you, John, I've taken a lot of copies. The quality is good enough that you can take a quality and turn it into a PowerPoint if you like.
Okay. She mentioned a case study that wasn't in her presentation that she might talk about, something about a session she did for a Native American, and it was a UFO that had shielding from a remote viewing or something like that.
I wrote that down. The word you used, Nancy, was RV protection cases.
Yes. Who am I speaking with here?
John.
John. Yeah.
Oh, hi, John. Yeah, good memory. Wow. Yeah, that was a really interesting case because I was doing that. It was via Skype, and I had gone on. There were several different questions, and she had wanted to know about some remote shielding and how to get around that. And we were at least 40 or 45 minutes into the reading, perfect Skype connection. And I said, well, the way that you would, and then all hell broke loose. She couldn't hear me, I couldn't hear her, the Skype went nuts, and eventually we had to end it. And so there was obvious, I would say, human interference in that. And then I thought was interesting, and I have really debated whether or not to include this as a synchronicity, because it seems to me to be so obviously a human intersection, let's say. The next day, or it was within about 12 hours, well, let me put it this way. I had mentioned one of my images I had given to her, and I'm not going to tell you what it was because it would be a little too specific, but it was a vegetable, and I had connected it with a country. And she said, well, if it's not that country, could it be, XYZ country, because there's a definite connection, and they were similar, not far from each other. I said, yeah, I could definitely see that. And within 12 hours, I had received a LinkedIn request from an alleged advisor to the president of that country, who was also a self-proclaimed CIA operative. So the question is, when you get something that appears to be human interference or interaction, do you include that as a synchronicity?
I mean, that's a good question. Marty, I'm not even aware of them mentioning synchronicity in our training. We don't even have a category for that, to be honest. And I'm kind of, I find it interesting. We might want to try and add something like that. Synchronicity. How do you?
During the session, synchronicity or nearby?
Well, it has to be rare, though. I mean, you mentioned that paralegal calling during your session with that. I've never had anything like that happen, and I've done hundreds and hundreds of sessions. Or maybe I didn't recognize it, but in general life, I do recognize synchronicity. It's just RV session seems to be rare.
Interesting. But where does the RV protection come in here, Nancy? I must have missed that. Maybe my mind wandered or something.
Oh, no, the question was, how do you get around certain shielding? And I was about to explain it.
Oh, okay.
And I got cut off.
Okay, go ahead.
What's that?
Oh, you were about to explain it, and that's when you got cut off.
That's when all hell broke loose on our Skype session.
Why don't you explain it now?
No. No, not gonna.
Okay. But you don't want to teach the rest of us how to do it?
No, because that's a different topic altogether.
Okay, fair enough. So interesting. CRVers claim that nothing can be hidden from them, which means there is no real RV protection, though Lynn Buchanan apparently has one exception. Okay, other questions, comments? We've gone about 2 hours, which is what we'd like to keep this to, but there you go, John. You have another one? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, since she's talking about communicating with aliens, and I'm going down this track because I'm in the middle of reading that particular book, but I'm wondering if there's any common messages between, I assume there's a number of races, or anything about disclosure. It's going to be in our generation, or generally, what are they saying? Is there anything in common?
You're talking about how to talk to an alien?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I do mention some of them. It's more towards the end of the book, and I think a lot of the messaging tends to be let's see. It's sort of a hermetic concept. You look to the microcosm to find the macrocosm type of an idea. Which I think it's also a way for, in sort of cryptic terms, or if you want to go, the concept of like Christ speaking in parables. I think it's a way to explain to those who would understand how we can access the matrix and why we should, and then because implicit in that is, if you hurt one, you hurt all. And therefore that promotes the concept of love, essentially. And I don't know if I've sort of gone too far off onto a tangent there, I mean, other messages are, you know, people being told that they're special, that they need to prevent certain man-made disasters on Earth and that kind of thing. Those are fairly common. Or that they need to nurture certain hybrid kids because, you know, they've got to save the future generations of humanity or hybrid humanity. I mean, there were all different types of messages.
This sounds all pretty positive, at least long-term intention. What about this concept of, are there, in your, I guess, experience opinion, negative aliens that are out to hurt us in some way?
Yeah, well, I'm going to disagree with Linda. I'm very sorry, Linda, but I do feel that there are groups of negative ones, and the same way I feel that there are battles being fought in heaven and earth, as they say, you know, between good and evil, and I think that that is reflected in what we're dealing with in the spirit realm and in the non-physical realm, as well as the physical realm. So yeah, my understanding is, and this comes from speaking, you know, I have friends, many friends who've had encounters, and so speaking with them, speaking with experts in the field, reading a huge amount of material, and then trying to sort through what I think is believable and credible and what's not. But I think that there's enough evidence rolling around out there to indicate that there are certain species that do not have our best interests at heart, and that would be more than happy to manipulate our collective destiny to their advantage.
Okay, that's why I sort of raised it, as trying to get the different opinions here. Okay, Laksh, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask something.
Sure.
Actually new to the group, and my question was for Nancy, and I just wanted to ask about her process when she does the reading. So she gets an email with maybe some pictures and some questions. And then what is your process to get into your reading? Like, do you do a meditation? What is it you do?
I've gone through different sort of evolutions of that, and I used to do very specific things, you know, because I used to feel it was very important. You know, I had to, first of all, get rid of all sound, and get into a highly meditative state. For a while, I used a very like a little Zen type bell to indicate that I was starting. Sometimes I did a bunch of different things, and finally I think I've gotten to a place right now where all I really need to do is put myself in a quiet space and set my attention, and I'm off to the races.
Nice.
That sounds just like what Joe McMonagle says. He used to use hemisync and all of that, and now he just simply knows the feeling of the correct state. Is that another way of saying the same thing? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, wow, this was fantastic at so many levels. Nancy, again, thank you so much for sharing all that great information with us. I'll definitely have you back. And with that, I think we should end that. So all of you take care and keep precogging, and I'll have this recording out as soon as I can.
Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Nancy. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very